listening to Footscray Live.
Welcome everyone, broadcasting live from Footscray City College. You're listening to Footscray Live. My name is Isaac Johns, and with me on my panel today I have Marley, Taylor, James and Luke. This is the Music and Community Show, and our special guest today is Paulie Stewart. Hi Paulie, how are you?
Good, very good, very good. Great to be here in the hippest suburb in the world.
We might just start off by asking, how did you get into music in the first place?
Look, I was never particularly into music that much, to tell you the truth. But I was asked to do a benefit concert once. A friend of ours got in trouble with some parking fines, and they needed to do a benefit concert, and they had a band. That was the Cosmic Psychos. They had a band ready to go, but they needed a support act, and they said, "Can you form a band for the night?" Now, this is a true story, you guys, so you've got to listen to this, okay? But this is actually true. So we formed a band for the night, and we thought we'd call ourselves the Painters and Dockers, because that was the name of a trade union in Port Melbourne that was really heavy, and the gig was at their pub. So we said, we'll call ourselves the Painters and Dockers. And we got up and we played our first ever show, and the guy who lived next door to the pub hated the music so much that he jumped the fence with an axe and started chopping up the mixing desk. Right.
Oh,
and all the kids just freaked out and started screaming and running away. And I was on the stage and I went, I want to do this for the rest of my life. But what actually happened was they rang the police and the police came. But because this was the Painters and Dockers pub, they had one rule at a Painters and Dockers pub. You could do anything you like, but no police. So when the police turned up, there was just an all-in brawl between the Painters and Dockers and the police. And our next 3 gigs were banned. But by the 5th gig, you couldn't get in because everyone wanted to see this radical band. We couldn't play our instruments. It took us about 4 years to actually learn how to play. Yeah. But so, it was sort of by accident I got involved with music,
So it was very spontaneous.
Very spontaneous. I must admit, punk music really was a great thing for me because when I was 15, my brother was actually killed up in East Timor. He was a journalist and he was killed with another 4 guys during the Indonesian invasion.
Oh, my God.
So I was 15. How old are you guys?
Oh, 14.
Well, I was 16, your ages and... It happened, and wow, it really sort of freaked me out. And I'd never heard of East Timor, didn't know where it was, or I've been there 20 times now. But and I was sort of an angry, mad sort of young guy. And then somebody introduced me to this thing called punk rock, and they said, "You just get up there and scream your guts out."
Yeah.
And I said, "What? And people pay you?" And they said, "Yeah." And I went, "Oh, this is ideal." So. We're still playing. We're playing tonight at the Esplanade Hotel, St Kilda. So it hasn't. It's still getting a lot out of it. It's lots of fun. Yeah.
So speaking of your brother in East Timor, I heard that you went to East Timor with the Wiggles. Can you tell us a bit about that?
The Wiggles. Now the old Wiggles, who I saw last Sunday, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and believe it or not, you guys, you know who's really pushing the social changes in Australia?
Who?
The Wiggles. Don't laugh at me. This is serious. Because in their lineup now, the Wiggles have Muslim girls, they have African guys, and they're featured as part of the team.
Yeah.
Emma, the girl Wiggle, she is now the absolute superstar, and every little girl you see there's got a yellow Emma. She's the feminist icon of Australia. Emma.
Even I see her all the time. Still, people are talking about her.
Yeah.
Emma from the Wiggles. Like, go on Instagram. Literally, I've seen her so many times.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous. But my connection with the Wiggles goes back to when they were a rock band called the Cockroaches.
Oh, yes.
Right? And we were in the Painters and Dockers, and we both pulled into a hotel in Queensland late one night. They said, how'd you guys go? Did you get anyone at the show? And we went, no one turned up. And I said, how did you guys go? And they said, yeah, same with us, no one turned up. And Anthony Wiggle, the Blue Wiggle, turned to me and actually said, this is a true story, turned to me and said, we're going to get out of rock and roll and get into kids' entertainment. And in a line they've never let me forget, I turned around and went, yeah, as if there's any money or fame in kids' entertainment. You know how much they make? $98 million a year each.
Oh my God.
Each. And they never forget to say, hey, Paulie, come and we'll show you how kids' entertainment doesn't take off. But
And Anthony's still doing it too. He never left.
Yeah, he never left. Can I tell you another Wiggles story?
Yeah,
it's a bit of a wanky thing. It's a name dropping thing, but I've got to tell it because I'm a journalist by trade too. And the Wiggles won one of their first ever American tours. They said, "Well, come with us and check out, what it's like for us in the States." And I was amazed because they don't do clubs in the States. They do like Marvel Stadium or the MCG. God. Like they do 60,000 seaters.
Yeah.
They are so popular. But they did this gig in New York, and I'd seen the show so many times that I went, I'm going to just wait backstage, and so I'm waiting backstage for the Wiggles to end, and there's a knock on the door, and I go, "Oh, who's this?" And I open the door, and it's Robert De Niro and his son. What? And he comes in, I go, "Are you looking at me? Are you looking at me?" No, I wish I'd said that. I never said that. And I'm just standing there with Robert De Niro going, "Oh, wow, chugga, big red car, like, fruit salad, yummy, yummy, yummy kind of thing." But I'm thinking, this can't get more surreal. And then there's another knock, and I open the door.
Who was it?
Jerry Seinfeld and his dad.
Oh, God.
And we're all just standing there, and the Wiggles run off, and I swear Jerry Seinfeld and Robert De Niro were sort of bumping each other to get their kid in first to meet the Wiggles. And I'm going, no one will ever believe this when I say this live on Footscray Live Radio. They'll never believe it, but it's true.
Yeah.
I'm kind of asking about your music. A lot of punk music is quite political. Would you say your music was similar to that?
I like to think it is. I've always thought one of the great things about music is you can use it as a vehicle to, change things around a bit. Punk for me was never about the mohawk and wearing the leather jackets. It was about changing. The guy who'd rock up at a gig in a wedding dress, I thought he was far more punk than someone with a mohawk. But, so we've, Painters and Dockers, have always allied ourselves to political causes. And because we're named after a trade union, we sort of brought it on ourselves a bit.
Yeah.
So we've done lots and lots of... almost half our shows would have been benefit shows, I reckon. Seriously, yeah.
So, James here.
Yeah, hi, James.
Hi. So you talked about how, you sort of got into punk rock in your teen years.
Yeah.
Very lightly. Did you have a potential career option before that, and had you really considered music?
I'd never considered music. I didn't know what I was going to do, to tell you the truth. I wasn't too bad at English at school, and my mum said to me, I was going for a job at the Herald Sun, and my marks were really bad, and my mum said, "I tell them that your brother was one of the guys killed in East Timor," because that company owned Channel 7 at the time. And I actually went and did this interview, and the guy was going, no, these marks are shit, they're not much good, and, it's unlikely you'll get a job. Why do you want to be a journo? And I said, because my brother was going to... And this guy freaked out and went and made a phone call, and he came back and he said, "You start 9 o'clock Monday." Yeah.
No, I just wanted to jump on when Luke mentioned, a lot of your songs were political.
Yeah.
What was the general reception when you first started the Painters and the Dockers, and just in general after you guys started getting more popularity? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was... for a start, my mum used to ring me all the time saying, "That's not you, is it?" Because there was always big headlines in the paper, "Painter and Docker shot dead." And she'd ring up and go, "Is that you?" And I go, No, that's the union, Mum. It's all right, But... we just took up... the best thing about being in a band is you can write whatever you like.
Yeah.
So, our first song we did, that we released as a single was called Nude School. And Michael Gadinsky, we were signed to Mushroom. He wanted us to do a film clip with the band, sort of with all these models in bikinis. And we went, everyone does that. So we actually did our clip naked on a pig farm. What? That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's a political act, Luke.
Yeah,
it was, mate. Get your gear off, bam, But a lot of people really were offended by that, and then so we followed it up with one of our real family favourites, Die Yuppie Die, which didn't get too much airplay either.
Yeah, I was looking at the titles of your songs before, and I love them so much.
Good on you. You'll have to come along sometime. Get up and sing a song. That's the thing about the Dockers. Everybody's in the band, so over the years, hundreds of people have got up, and I don't even know who's going to be singing tonight. Seriously.
How would you say that your music has developed and changed over the years? Because you said, what was it, the 80s, the 90s?
Yeah,
you started off, so
you weren't born, guys, when we were playing. Yeah. Well, we've sort of stuck to the same sort of sound, and what our sort of point of difference is, it's punky, but we've got a brass section. We've always had a three-piece brass section just to give it that sort of, that R&B feel a little bit, which is we don't get up there and try and be the loudest, thrashiest band.
Yeah.
In fact, bands like that sort of bore me a bit. We chuck in a bit of trumpets and saxophone and harmonica. Yeah.
What's your musical process for composing music? Because you mentioned there's multiple instruments involved, much like older bands like the Beatles.
Yeah.
So do you guys start off with lyrics, or start off with the music? Do you have formulas, or do you just muck around?
We just muck around, Isaac, or we come up with a subject, that. Like our last single, for example, that was inspired by catching the Williamstown train to Footscray at 2:30 in the afternoon. A guy was trying to open the window with his head.
Oh my God.
So we wrote a song called Holiday on Ice.
Yeah.
And and I took that to the band, and they sort of came up with a tune around it. But it's amazing where you'll get song ideas from. They can come from anywhere. I play in this other band. After the Dockers, I played many years with a band called the Dilly All Stars. Half the crew in the band are East Timorese, and like one of our favourite songs we got because we were touring Portugal for the Communist Party, and I was at a bar, and the waiter came up to me and another band member and said, what do you think of Portugal? And I said, mate, the men are beautiful, the women are beautiful, it's a beautiful country. This old guy went, yeah, and he walked away. And then just before he got to the bar, he turned around and he came back and he whispered in my ear, but nothing tastes better than the neighbour's chicken. and I went, that's a song. And now it's the highlight of our set in the Dilly All Stars. Nothing tastes better than the neighbour's chicken. Yeah. So they can come from all over the place, yeah.
So on a bit of a different note, you are the founder of The Pricks, right?
Yeah.
Performers releasing information about clean syringes or careful sex.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, that was a real 80s, 90s thing when the AIDS crisis really kicked in, when they had ads on television with death bowling balls down and killing people. We formed a collective of musos that went into prisons and refuges and spread just simple messages about how to put condoms on carrots or bananas or cleaners. We didn't go in and say don't take drugs. We went in and said, listen, if you're going to do it carefully and look after your mates. And but I've since progressed from that. In about 2010, I got diagnosed with a really bad liver. Because of all the years of excess had caught up, and I had stupidly used intravenous drugs a few times. And I'm just saying to everyone out there listening, don't even think about being such a dickhead as I was and doing that. And I ended up in the Austin Hospital, and I needed a liver transplant. And so I went through. That took about 2 years to go through this massive process. But now I'm actually in a band called The Transplants, where everybody in the band's had a liver transplant. Yeah.
Cool.
A guy tried to join the other day, and I said, you haven't had a hair transplant? He said, yeah, I got some, he'd had a wig transplant. And I said, piss off, mate. You got to have give me a liver at least, come on,
Just a bit of a follow-up. Did you tailor the name of Prick so that it sounded like the word prick?
Oh, absolutely. Of course. I'm always one for shock and outrage, yeah. Because we had to go into prisons, and it was, youth detention. So the guys in there are pretty kind of, they don't take any sort of bullshit, So if we'd gone in and called ourselves the musicians who really care about others with love, it would have been, we're going to knife you guys.
Yeah.
So it was great getting up and going, g'day, I'm Paulie from the Pricks. Yeah. And it was like, oh, boom,
Had a good impact, good effect.
Yeah.
For those just tuning in, you're listening to the Music and Community Show on Footscray Live, and our special guest is Paulie Stewart. Paulie, earlier you mentioned, you've spoken a couple of times about East Timor. Tell us about your affinity with East Timor. How did all of that start?
Yeah, well, basically, my brother was one of the journalists who was killed up there in 1975. The Indonesians invaded East Timor. It had been a Portuguese colony, but it was independent briefly for a bit, but then the Indonesians sort of took advantage of a civil unrest and invaded. And unfortunately for my brother and 4 other guys, they're up on the border area filming all the tanks rolling in that the Indonesians said weren't, and they were captured and, they were executed. So it really freaked me out at the time. I never thought I'd have an involvement with East Timor like I have. Like, I've just come back from my 20th time there. And just to follow on from that story about the liver transplant, what happened was I was in the Austin hospital, and this priest came and saw me and did the last rites, see you later, alligator, you're out of here. And they said, we can't get you a compatible liver, you're going to die, and I was like, shit, and... But then I woke up in the hospital and there was a little nun sitting at the end of my bed, and she was dark-skinned, and I didn't realise that for about 10 minutes. And I said, "Oh, where are you from, sister?" And she said, "This country called East Timor." And I went, "Gee, that's outrageous. I've got a really strong family connection there." And she said, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, my brother was one of the journos, and I play in a band." And she said, "Not the Dilly All-Stars?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, you guys got some food up to my village once. Why are you actually here?" And I said, "Oh, sister, I need a new liver." And she said, and she thought about it for a tick, and then she said, "I'll get you one." And I went, this nun's drinking the altar wine far too early. Or she's helping herself to the oxygen, she's getting a good dose of it. And I'm going, "Oh, yeah, whatever, sister." And she said, "But if I get you one, you've got to help the women and kids in Timor." And I went, yeah, whatever, this nun's crazy. And then next morning, after waiting 18 months and crying myself to sleep every night, going, "I'm going to die," they rocked in and said, "Got a perfect match for you. This is a crazy thing." And
that's brilliant.
And I look at it now as do-do-do-do-do-do-do. And everyone's going, "No, it's just a coincidence." I'm going, "Listen, you weren't in that bed dying, baby," And so the last 4 times I've been to Timor, I go from playing in full rock punk bands to hanging out with nuns. Yeah. And the nuns are more full on. Yeah.
Now that you're just mentioning, some of the things you've experienced, and you've obviously written a lot of songs about that. What are some of the biggest impacts that your music has made that you've seen to other people?
Biggest impact, I don't know, just making them feel good and sing along and jump around. And I suppose because we have written songs about East Timor, we've enlightened people to the situation that's happening up there. And I really, we wrote a lot of songs about, Aboriginal deaths in custody in the 80s, which wasn't a sort of really popular topic then. So I hope we've, there's nothing worse than going to see someone who preaches at you. We don't do that. We do fun songs and preachy songs and wrap it all into one package and call it entertainment. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned before you performed in juvenile detention centres, jails, women's refuges. What was that experience like?
Interesting, given that some of the Maori lads are really big guys. At 16, 17, they're like back rowers for the All Blacks. With full length beards and tats, and it's pretty daunting, but. I suppose once you get to meet the young people in there, then you hear their stories and you realise they're all victims of crime and stuff too, and have all been caught up in the system. I now actually work at a place in Collingwood called the Artful Dodger Studio, and we provide art making and music making facilities to a lot of refugee crew and asylum seekers, young gay crew, young people coming out of custody, young people with mental health issues, young people battling substance abuse issues, and it's fantastic. If you're ever in the area, Smith and Gertrude Street, drop in, boys. No worries, you'd be more than welcome, because the kids we work with are so hungry for success, and I'm really rapt to say some of our alumni from the studio. One guy is he came in. He's a very big guy, and he was very unsure of himself, but he got into hip-hop, and his last gig was supporting Eminem at the MCG,
Oh my gosh.
Adrian Eagle, and Fliebes, who was a child soldier from Burundi that couldn't speak English when he arrived here, I used to take him into schools and he'd just tell his story. Now he gets $1,500 a spot to talk for an hour. So it's really great getting the young stories out of people. That's why this radio station's such a good idea, getting your stories out there, guys. Yeah.
So kind of about punk as like a concept. When I was growing up, I kind of had this idea that punks would be kind of, I don't know, racist, homophobic. Like I was very scared of them. And then when I because a lot of my friends and my boyfriends really involved in the punk scene in Melbourne, I understood that there were groups of queer punks and anti-racist punks and feminist punks. And like, it's such an inclusive community. Yeah. So like, do you think like that's really beneficial for like...
Oh, absolutely. The punk thing brought in so many... one of my best friends in the world is a gay Brisbane girl called Jenny Pineapple. And she, I love getting her on stage with the Painters and Dockers because she just totally dispels the masculinity. She goes, sit down, dickhead, to some guy in the crowd. And she'll just take over. I often say, if you ever want to fix up the problem with the Taliban, just parachute Jenny Pineapple in with a baseball bat and say, these guys don't treat the ladies so nice, Jenny. And, mate, she'd have it sorted in 3 days, I tell you, yeah. But no, look, it's been and we've done, punk benefits of gay gigs, lots, with, she was in a band called Deregulator, and one of my favourite ever bands, I don't know if you've ever heard of them, called Pansy Division.
Yes, I love them.
Yeah. Well, we know those guys, so that was, it was good.
What's your least favourite part about your job?
Money. Not in that I haven't got any, just in I wish our young people could get more access to money, because a lot of them are really broke, and sometimes when you go to places and I say, well, our young person's done a talk, you have to pay them, they go, should I pay them in cash or a food voucher? And I say, what is this, like a refugee camp? Give them the cash, what do you mean? So that gets frustrating. But look, to tell you the truth, I can't be too pissed off about too much, because I was going to die 10 years ago, so I'm really lucky to be here. Yeah.
So, as well, you manage and mentor leading African hip hop act. What is that pronounced? The Fliebes?
The Fliebes, yeah.
Fliebes, right?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, they were just two young guys who were sitting at that studio sometime, and they said, I walked past them and I said, who are you guys? And they said, we're rappers. Can you get us some gigs? And I went, yeah. This is crap, let's see how we go. And I said, okay, well, meet me tomorrow morning at Williamstown Botanical Gardens at 7:30, because I had lined up a photo of Steve Bracks there to promote something we're doing. And I thought, if these two guys rock up, I'll work with them. And they rocked up, and we must have done like 300 schools now. And I've actually taken the Fliebes up to East Timor, which was fantastic. 2 African boy rappers to East Timor, because it was like I'd arrived with Jay-Z and, Kanye West. It was like we were mobbed. There were 5,000 people at their first gig. It was
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Now that you're just mentioning, sort of like young new artists, what would you recommend to upcoming musicians who, want to work in the music industry?
Yeah. Keep going, and don't let anybody tell you you're doing wrong. There's so many great studios and facilities you can make music now in Melbourne. Just don't stop, because it's funny, we lost a great old rocker this week, recently, called Greedy Smith, from a band called Mental As Anything. And I can remember the Dockers put out Nude School. A lot of people really hated us because they said we didn't take it seriously. And he said to me once, no, just keep playing, stick to your guns, and don't let them tell you any different. And that would be my advice too, yeah.
Obviously, you guys are still together now, which I think is incredible. I mean, it's a tremendous effort. Not too many bands stick around for even
it's
just
all
a few
sticky
years.
tape. Yeah.
But what would you say is the difference, sort of like when you guys started performing, in the 80s? What's it like performing now, still literally today?
I think you get a bit more respect off the club owners now, a little bit. It's still really tough being an Australian musician. I mean, I actually don't know how to sell music anymore, because You can do it on vinyl, I suppose, but CDs are obsolete, and iTunes is sort of. And then you put it up on Spotify and you don't get paid. So basically, I've been in the music industry for 30 years and I've never made much from the actual selling of the music.
Yeah.
Playing it live, you make it, but selling it, it's another different story. Yeah.
On Wednesday we had Aaron B. What's your connection with him?
Aaron B is a fantastic young Koori guy, Indigenous guy who comes into the studio, and he lives about a block from here. And I said, listen, they've got a great concept happening down there at Footscray. Come in and get involved. And he said, no worries. I'd also like to give you an apology from my daughter, and you guys probably are more familiar with her than you are with me. She's an Indigenous. I'm born and bred white boy from St Kilda, but my daughter's an Indigenous girl, and she's done that. Footscray Station, the big mural. We're in the sun. We're all in the struggle, but we're looking for the sunshine. Yeah, she did that one, believe it or not, they took all the Aboriginal kids to Canberra. And had a national Indigenous youth parliament, and she was voted the first ever female prime minister. Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah. Cool. So you probably know Aretha just from around. I don't know if you guys do, but she's brought me here to this school to see plays and stuff. Yeah,
yeah, cool. So there's a lot of people out there who really need a message. There's, whether it be kids wanting to become musicians, people who are struggling with drug abuse problems, so on, etc., and even people who need things like transplants and need, I suppose, a word of hope. If you had to give one overall life message, what would that be?
Wow. Okay. Well, I don't know if I can give it to you in a simple message, but I'll tell you what gets me through it all, okay? And that's hanging out with these little nuns in Timor, because they don't live a life where the accumulation of money and toys is what it's all about, So many people my age now come to me and say, well, I've got all this stuff, but my life seems meaningless, and I wish I was working with young kids like you. And I go, look, I love it. It's great, but you don't make much money. But maybe what I'm trying to tell you guys is money's not everything, seriously. And to do something that's good for your heart and soul is probably much better. Yeah.
I think that's a really good thing to finish on, actually. So thank you for being on the show today, Paulie. It's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been an honour being here, boys, and I hope it goes really well. And keep going. Stick to your guns.
Thank you very much. That was Paulie Stewart, legendary Australian musician. My name is Isaac Johns, and I'd like to thank my panel members today, Marley, Taylor, James, and Luke. This has been the Music and Community Show on Footscray Live.
You're listening to Footscray Live.